All right, man, peace. So for those of you brothers who've been following this whole Kawhi Leonard narrative throughout the NBA season, we know that one of the pivotal moments in the dissolution of the relationship between Kawhi Leonard and the San Antonio Spurs is when Gregg Popovich decided to declare the code red on Kawhi Leonard, and he dispatched Mr. Tony Parker and Mr. Manu Ginobili to assault Kawhi Leonard verbally through the media, to try to initiate some type of mental and psychological warfare against Kawhi Leonard, because it was very clear to me that Kawhi Leonard is not ready to play the good soldier. He's no longer willing to play the good soldier. Well, recently, Tony Parker has decided that he's going to sign a 2-year contract with the Charlotte Hornets, owned by Michael Jordan. Tony Parker grew up in France, a humongous Michael Jordan fan, so it did not surprise me that that is the franchise that he chose to go to. But the cover story is that Tony Parker's going to the Charlotte Hornets to play behind Kemba Walker so that he can finish his career playing 20 years as he's always wanted to do, because he's not going to get enough playing time on the San Antonio Spurs, which I'm incredulous about, because I would think that he would get more playing time on the San Antonio Spurs than he would on the Charlotte Hornets. So it's very clear to me that the reason why the San Antonio Spurs have decided to allow Tony Parker to leave the franchise is because they think that that may put them in a better position to possibly win over Kawhi Leonard by getting rid of one of the players who decided that he was going to go in front of the media and declare that his injury was 100 times worse than Kawhi Leonard's. I think that that was an embarrassment to Kawhi that he's not willing to forgive. I think that the San Antonio Spurs have come to understand that, and they're now desperate to figure out if there's a way that they can exhaust any and every channel to try to keep Kawhi Leonard before they eventually trade him. So that is why I believe they decided to allow Tony Parker to walk, because of what he represents. He's a good soldier. Tony Parker does whatever Pop wants him to do. If Coach Popovich wanted Tony Parker to stay with the Spurs, he would. I'm not buying this storyline that Tony Parker feels he's going to get more playing time on the Charlotte Hornets, and that's why he's leaving the Spurs. It makes no sense. It only would make sense if he was going to a team where he could start, so he can back up Dejounte Murray, or he could back up Kemba Walker. I have a hard time believing that he's going to get more playing time playing behind Kemba Walker than Dejounte Murray. But anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
But guys, Woj is also reporting that free agent guard Tony Parker has agreed to a 2-year, $10 million deal with Charlotte. Parker ending his 17-year run in San Antonio that included 4 NBA championships.
Let me say this. Michael Jordan is going to have to try to figure out what he wants to do with that franchise, because right now they're in a worse place than just about any other franchise in the NBA, because they're not good enough to make the playoffs or make a run in the playoffs should they make the playoffs, and they're also not bad enough to get a bona fide, top-notch first-round draft pick high in the draft. So they're in about as bad a place as you could be. If I was Michael Jordan, I would consider quote-unquote tanking for a season or two and try to utilize a combination of the strategies that have been utilized by the Philadelphia 76ers and the Boston Celtics over the last couple of years that have suddenly brought those two franchises to prominence. I just think that right now the Charlotte Hornets are in a very bad place, and I think that it goes against Jordan's DNA to lose on purpose, or to tank, or to give away many of their top assets, whatever they may be. But that's what I would consider. I don't think that bringing in Tony Parker is going to make the Charlotte Hornets any more viable to make a playoff run. I just don't see it.
Parker ranks 1st in assists, 2nd in games and minutes, 3rd in field goals, 5th in steals, and...
Wow, I'm surprised to see that Tony Parker almost has 20,000 points. Wow, he is a Hall of Famer.
And free throws, and a source just reported that Gregg Popovich, he called him in the last hour to inform him of the decision to accept the Charlotte offer.
You mean Gregg Popovich called Tony Parker to inform Tony Parker that I've decided to accept the Charlotte Hornets offer on your behalf? You will sign there as a free agent, Tony Parker.
Guys, so Max, I'll start with you on this. With the eventual departure of Kawhi and now this, Max, is this the official end of the Spurs era?
I'm not quite sure if it's the official end of the Spurs era quite yet. I need to see how they look next year and how they could possibly rebound. The Spurs have pretty much always found a way. But if we really want to be concrete about it, the championship level Spurs run ended when Tim Duncan retired, because his era has been the only championship level era in their history. they've had good teams going all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s with George Iceman Gervin. Starting from the late 80s with David Robinson, they were considered championship contenders every year in the 90s, but they were never able to get over the hump because even though David Robinson was a great player, he was never as great as the top three players of the 90s, that being Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Charles Barkley. So whenever David Robinson would run into those guys, he would lose in the playoffs. It wasn't until they were able to draft a truly transcendent player like a Tim Duncan that they were able to get over the hump. All these other draftees have just been garlands. They've just been additional ornaments on that Tim Duncan Christmas tree. But I'm still waiting to see what they do with Kawhi. That will officially be the death knell for the Spurs' reign over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I think it is. Normally, again, the way I said Jerry West is the greatest executive of all time. Popovich may be, who else as an executive / coach since Red Auerbach can compare to Gregg Popovich?
In the NBA, probably nobody. Probably no one who's had both those jobs concurrently. Now, Pat Riley has been a great coach. He's also been a great GM. But I don't think that he's ever done both of those jobs concurrently to the level of Gregg Popovich.
He's incredible, and everyone loves everything about him, on and off the court. Not everything about him, but,
Well, you like everything about him because you're a quote-unquote woke Caucasian liberal Jew.
They love what he represents, the way he's been a real American leader in a time of need, actually.
He's been an American leader. Okay, I'm guessing that you're going to put that in quotes because he has not led America anywhere.
At least as a public figure, the things he said, he's outspoken, he's righteous, and love Popovich. But
no, what Gregg Popovich is a microphone activist. He's someone who says certain things when he's in front of a microphone. He understands the importance of endearing himself to his players. He also understands the importance of making liberal comments so that he can make the San Antonio Spurs a viable option for free agents. It still has never worked. No matter how woke he has acted, LeBron James still decided to not come and play there.
But given his age, given where the franchise is in terms of resources, draft picks, etc., I know they got Kawhi not with a top pick. They could identify a hidden jewel and polish it over several years, and maybe the Spurs will be right back to where they were.
Well, what makes it much easier to identify great prospects is when you have a transcendent player as your linchpin like a Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan has been the Tom Brady of the NBA.
But given Popovich's age, and given what it looks like the Spurs have in the cupboard, which to me it doesn't look bare, but it doesn't look plentiful either, I think that the Kawhi situation, more to the point of it, but also maybe symbolically the Tony Parker situation, represents the end of an era. Guys, it's the right move for the Spurs. I don't know why they paid Pau Gasol and kept him around, but they should.
They paid Pau Gasol and kept him around. You're answering your own question, Max Kellerman. They paid Pau Gasol and kept him around because he's not an offense to Kawhi Leonard. That is why they're getting rid of Tony Parker, or they're quote-unquote allowing him to sign with the Charlotte Hornets because he is an offense to Kawhi Leonard. That's why. You're answering your own question. You just don't see the forest through the trees.
Shouldn't pay Tony Parker at this point. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's a former Finals MVP. But given his age and the kind of player he is now, they're right to move on from him. But
let me say this. Tony Parker as your backup point guard for only $5 million a year is a steal. There was a time period where Tony Parker was the best player in the NBA in the paint, no matter the position, no matter the size. He had the greatest conversion percentage in the paint of any player in the NBA. He was dynamite getting to the basket at one point in his career. If you watch that first San Antonio Spurs Miami Heat series, he was dominant in the first couple of games until he hurt his hamstring.
But I think symbolically, it does kind of represent the end, certainly, of the last Spurs era, but maybe even of the Popovich era as, the Spurs, this perennial team that could win the championship any year.
Stephen A., before you jump in, let me just add, Woj also reporting that the Spurs did want Parker back, but Parker will take on a significant role with the Hornets, apparently behind Kemba Walker.
Yes, that's the official narrative. They want us to believe that Tony Parker is going to play a bigger role playing behind Kemba Walker, who is the linchpin of the Charlotte Hornets franchise, averaging 35-plus minutes a game. And Tony Parker is allegedly going to play a bigger role on that team than he would have played as a backup on the San Antonio Spurs behind DeJounte Murray. Sure.
Well, he's going to take on a more significant role, Molly, because he's going to play more minutes and he's going to make...
You believe that, Stephen A. Smith? You believe that Tony Parker's going to get more minutes playing behind Kemba Walker than he would have gotten playing behind DeJounte Murray?
...to make more money. The Spurs weren't going to pay him $10 million a year and more...
Well, he's not getting $10 million a year with the Charlotte Hornets. Pay attention, brother. He's getting $5 million a year.
More importantly, they weren't going to play him more than the 19 minutes per game that he got last year. DeJounte Murray is the new point guard for the San Antonio Spurs. They got a...
Brother, I guarantee you that DeJounte Murray is not going to get more than 30 minutes a game. In the Spurs system, very few of their players get more than 30 minutes a game. I don't see Tony Parker getting more than 15 minutes a game on the Charlotte Hornets, not playing behind Kemba Walker, unless they play them both on the floor at the same time.
A lot of love for him. He's got nice height on him, nice length on him. He's shown some ability as well, and that goes a long way. But I agree with Max in terms of this being the end of an era, and I'll tell you why. The era began not just because of David Robinson, but primarily with the arrival of Tim Duncan.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just because of Tim Duncan's greatness. It's because Tim Duncan bought whatever Gregg Popovich and the Spurs organization was selling.
Absolutely. That is why Tim Duncan is the Tom Brady of the NBA. I had a brother try to assert that Kobe Bryant is the Tom Brady of the NBA. Absolutely not. To me, if I had to liken Kobe Bryant unto a football great, I would probably liken him unto John Elway. A phenomenal talent who oftentimes had issues with the coaching staff and with management because he thought he was not getting enough help, who was finally able to win a couple of championships late in his career with him as the lead guy because he was able to finally get the personnel around him that could assist him and bring out his greatness in championship moments. That's who I would liken Kobe Bryant to in regards to his NFL version. Kobe Bryant, to me, is the NBA version of a John Elway.
And so because of that, that's what enabled Gregg Popovich to become who he was. Whether he is great of a man as I know him to be, you know, when you look at stuff for media purposes, how truculent he could come across and whatever the case may be, those are the kind of things that, you know what, you couldn't pull that off unless you were winning, and you couldn't pull that off unless you had somebody like Tim Duncan who always sided with you, stood by your side, and allowed you to coach him. I recall one time when I was covering the Sixers and Larry Brown and Allen Iverson were getting into it, and Allen Iverson got benched for showing up late to a practice one day. That night, Gregg Popovich benched Tim Duncan because Gregg Popovich and Larry Brown were that close. Tim Duncan hadn't done anything wrong, but Gregg Popovich sat him on the bench anyway because he wanted to show that indeed stars can be benched.
No, what Gregg Popovich wanted to show, not just Larry Brown, but the entire NBA, is that he had Tim Duncan firmly under his control, under his thumb, and that Tim Duncan was his proverbial golem. That's all he was showing by that stunt, Stephen A. Smith. And that's the exact reason why Kawhi Leonard wants out of that cult. You're telling that story as if that's something that someone should be proud of. Really, all that is displaying is how big of a control freak and how big of a psychological manipulator Gregg Popovich is, and once again, why Kawhi Leonard wants out.
You don't just sit up there and throw somebody out there and let anybody circumvent rules and regulations.
Absolutely you don't. You have to maintain order, you have to maintain standards, but you also have to inflict punishments on people who actually infract those rules. You don't make a show and a spectacle of your law-abiding stars by sitting them to show some type of confederacy with another coach, just so that you can show, okay, we have all these guys under our thumbs and under our control. That's the exact reason why Gregg Popovich is now pretty much a relic in the NBA and why he cannot get any prominent players to come play for him, because they're not going to put up with that bullshit. Kudos to Tim Duncan for being able to tolerate that. But most people will not be able to tolerate that, nor should they.
Just because they're the marquee, there must be order. Gregg Popovich.
Yes. And by Gregg Popovich sitting Tim Duncan for no reason, was that a display of order or a display of megalomaniacal behavior?
Popovich was a protege of Larry Brown's. He did it just to help Larry Brown send that kind of message at that particular moment in time.
So in other words, Larry Brown could not handle his own problem. He needed every coach in the NBA to sit their most prominent star so that they could show that they were all going to be Confederate. And then you wonder why Latrell Sprewell did what he did and choked the shit out of PJ Carlesimo.
At least that's what I was told by Larry Brown and confidants of Larry Brown. So what you have is a situation where once upon a time that could happen. In this day and age, players have more control than ever before, more control of their own destiny and destination than ever before.
And that's a good thing. You need to have checks and balances, because when you don't have that, coaches take their power for granted and they go overboard, as your story about Gregg Popovich conveys very, very clearly and succinctly.
And when you have one of the elite players in the game who is as mild-mannered and as low-key as they come, still wanting to depart from the real walk in San Antonio to go to Los Angeles, that is a problem. And then also we forget this. How many times did we talk on this show about how much LeBron James loves and reveres Gregg Popovich?
Allegedly. Once again, there are certain people that you quote-unquote love and revere because you don't have to live with them. There's a saying that you don't know someone until you live with them. I think that LeBron James has enough wisdom to know that even though he likes a lot of the things that Gregg Popovich says, he's not going to try to muddy the waters. He's not going to confuse what Gregg Popovich says with who Gregg Popovich is as a coach. Popovich is a control freak. LeBron James is a control freak. You can't have two control freaks in the same room because they will clash eventually. LeBron knows that at this stage in his career, he's unwilling to play in any other style of offense other than the LeBron James system. So many of LeBron James' super fans make these excuses that LeBron has never played under a great coach. The only reason why you can say that he's never played under a great coach is because he's never given certain coaches the chance to become great. I think that Eric Spoelstra is a great coach, but we'll never be able to really call him one, because he's never had a great roster for long enough to show how great of a coach he is. So, of course, one of the excuses that LeBron James and his fans will have in the aftermath of his career is that he was never truly taught the game, and still look at everything that he was able to accomplish. You can make that statement, but we can also say that in the era of mobility, he's had the ability, he's had the options to go play under great coaches, and he's chosen not to. Supposedly, he loves Gregg Popovich so much. How come he didn't sign with the Spurs?
Considers him an incredible coach, an incredible basketball mind. He has an incredible amount of love for Gregg Popovich.
From afar.
I didn't see San Antonio on his list of destinations.
Ding.
He wasn't going there. And so,
not even a little bit was he going there, Stephen A. Smith.
So when you look at it from that perspective, you can love, respect, and revere Gregg Popovich and truly appreciate the greatness and the first-class status that the San Antonio Spurs have held for years. But in the end, are you clamoring to go there? If you get the choice to choose your destination as a free agent, 99% of the time, the answer is no for the truly marquee guys. And that's the difference.
Max,
you don't have that anymore.
Before you jump in here, I just want to welcome everybody as we cross the 5 o'clock hour here into our First Take afternoon special. Max Kellerman, Stephen A. Smith, Molly Karaman. Obviously, we're discussing if this is an end of the era for the Spurs with Kawhi wanting out and Parker now leaving. Max?
Yeah, the question is, did the era end with Tim Duncan, really? I mean, look, Kawhi Leonard, they were up 20 points, 23 points on the Warriors at the half when Kawhi...
And that's my point. This is why I have a hard time fully buying the assertion that Kawhi Leonard was running from leadership. I think that after a while he was running from being a lieutenant in the San Antonio Spurs cult when he realized the control mechanisms that they would try to execute on him for not doing exactly what they wanted him to do when they wanted him to do it. I think that he was willing to lead that franchise initially. Once again, that 2016-2017 Spurs team, they had the Golden State Warriors on the ropes in Game 1. And I think that the Warriors are a team that's a rhythm team. Steph Curry is a rhythm player. So oftentimes teams, even great teams, they take their vibe from their best player or their most prominent player. Steph Curry is a rhythm player. The Golden State Warriors are a rhythm team. The Spurs had shown that they were able to take the Warriors out of their rhythm. And after Kawhi Leonard went down, everything changed. It would have been very interesting to see what would have happened if Kawhi Leonard would have played that whole series fully healthy, because they were providing a lot of matchup problems for the Warriors in that series. And I just think that, once again, you don't really know someone until you live with them. Kawhi Leonard has had his opportunity to live with Popovich for quite a few years now, and he knows that he no longer wants to deal with him.
Kawhi got hurt in Game 1, but none of us believed that the Spurs were going to actually beat the Warriors.
Well, you never know. I would have still picked the Warriors, but I think that series would have been a barn burner.
We we figured they might extend them after seeing that first half of basketball, 6 games, something like that. But Tim Duncan was a uniquely great player.
Yes, he was one of the most underrated players in the history of the NBA. It's between Tim Duncan, Moses Malone, Isaiah Thomas, Dr. J, Bill Russell. Those are the most underrated all-time great players in the history of the NBA, in my view.
You mentioned his personality and what he accepted from Popovich. Much in the same way as great as Belichick is, and I sing Belichick's praises, much like Popovich, as not just a great coach, but a great GM, right? And I brought up Red Auerbach. Also, he had Bill Russell. Popovich had Tim Duncan. Obviously, Belichick has Tom Brady. These on-the-court kind of extensions of the coach/GM.
Absolutely, and Tim Duncan is the NBA version of Tom Brady.
The player leaders. There are very few players throughout history like Bill Russell or Tim Duncan or Tom Brady. So as much as I credit Popovich, a lot of it may have been, Popovich was fortunate he had a guy like Duncan.
Of course. And I don't see why people try to create this distinction between great coach and great player. You have to have great players on your team to have a prominent franchise for a long period of time. What a great coach can do is make a team competitive. A great coach can take a roster of players, no matter who they are, as long as they're NBA quality or professional sports quality, and make them competitive. But you need transcendent players in order to win championships. It does not matter who you are. Whether you're Phil Jackson, Red Auerbach, Pat Riley, Chuck Daly, whoever, Gregg Popovich. There have been no great coaches that had great teams without great players. That just doesn't happen.
Duncan's gone, and I don't think it's coincidental that it seems to fall apart in his absence.
I don't think that it's truly fallen apart. I think that a lot of the psychological mechanisms that have attempted to be used by Gregg Popovich have blown up in his face. I think that he's done a very poor job of evaluating Kawhi Leonard psychologically. He thinks that he can manipulate everyone the same way, and you can't do that. Tim Duncan has his own psychological paradigm or pattern, and Kawhi Leonard has his own, and you have to be able to adapt.
We got to leave it there, guys.
But anyway, that's pretty much it on this issue in regards to Tony Parker. Once again, I believe that the Spurs let him go in a last-ditch attempt to try to win Kawhi Leonard back over. We'll see if that works or not. So peace.